Hello, my name is Brian and welcome to my channel. Before I get into the subject of the title of the video, I'd like to explain to you why I'm here and what my plans are for the channel. My spiritual journey started about 2.5 years ago, and I'd say there's no end to a spiritual journey, but I've traveled far enough down the path where I feel like I have some useful information for you guys. I consider myself to be an aggregator. My whole life I've done that. I've aggregated information, whether that be football or whatever things I have an interest in, I dig all the way in. Once I start, I just keep going and going and going and gathering and gathering and gathering because I become obsessed with things, and I've now become obsessed with this specific subject. So I'd like to put out some content that will maybe be helpful for people who are new to this, like this specific, the 3D to 5D thing that I'm going to talk about now, and hopefully people will find it helpful. So we constantly hear or constantly see on YouTube teachers talking about 3D versus 5D. 3D is bad, 5D is good, getting out of the 3D into the 5D, the world's going into a 5D conscious state, that type of thing. And if you're new to this, I would think you would find that kind of confusing because you don't really know what 3D and 5D are. So I'm going to try to break it down into what I feel is the simplest form, or simple is not the right word, but the most trimmed down form, so that it could be something that's somewhat easily digestible for you. So we'll start out with 5D, which is how we're all basically born. You're brought into this planet new, and you go through the veil of forgetting, and you end up a baby, a beautiful, gorgeous, lovely baby, deserving of love. So you start off and you have and I use the Law of One language. That's what I resonate with, so that's what I'll be mostly using, I'm sure. You have your mind, you have your body, and you have your spirit, and then you have your little seat of consciousness here, your piece of God that is you. You are God. And then there's the big C, the creator. I use the term the one infinite creator. You can use whatever term you feel comfortable with, whether that be God, Allah, spirit, creator. They're all fine. They all work. So you come into the world, and as you age and you start, society starts forcing you to conform. Your little consciousness starts to move more towards the mind, more towards the ego, because that's what is useful to you as you get older. Because the spirituality part of it, I mean, we do have children that are brought up spiritual, but it's pretty rare, especially in specifically Western society. You go to church on Sunday, 1 hour of your time per week is probably not enough, in my opinion, to consider yourself and to be really pursuing a spiritual path. So as you get a little older, and life, and there are real traumas, that's part of the deal. You get traumatized as a child, that's where most people's shadows start to form, and then you start making decisions through the small m, through fear and lack and all those types of things, and it starts to make life more difficult and a lot less enjoyable. So as you get older, you're in middle school, you meet your first bully, and you start moving further and further away from spirituality and further into your ego, your small m, and that connection, it's still there, but it's much diminished as you get further and further away from it. And you'll always be in your body because you're in your body. Your consciousness, most people feel it right between their eyes, a couple inches back. That's where you sort of feel like your consciousness is located, and it oscillates. So you stub your toe, it'll oscillate between the toe and and it's super painful. And as the pain starts to fade, you start oscillating less, and it centers itself back into between your eyes. Or when you have sex, those kind of things. It can move around. You can also come completely out of body. Some people experience that as well. But you're moving more and more. Point is, you're moving more and more towards the 3D consciousness. And then here's the drawing, I would say, that represents what most people, once you reach adolescence or whatever, this is how you're kind of walking around. You've really, really lost your connection to source. spirit, consciousness, the big C, and you're really, really in your mind. You're really letting the ego is running everything, because it's the executioner, but you've asked it to do what it wasn't meant to do, which is become the planner. It's meant to execute the plan that that your spirit, your intuition comes up with, versus how we run around, where we let the ego do everything. And it's not the ego's fault. It's being asked to do the job it's not meant to do. It's like being you're working at a restaurant and you're a cook and there's no manager. Well, you got to figure out something. The customers are lining up. The cook's going to figure out a way to get everything going, but it's not really running the business the way it's meant to be. And that's when you're stuck in quote unquote 3D consciousness. You're in your mind, you're in your ego. You are not spiritual at all at that point, which is how I lived most of my life. And then I had my awakening moment, I guess you would say. I had a meeting with a medium who was incredibly high frequency person, and I had never experienced that before. I didn't know what that felt like, and I went, and it was an amazing hour where I got some closure and things like that. But the thing that I took away from it most was he was so high frequency. I mean, like crazy high frequency. And I felt very like I was a very low frequency person. And his frequency was so powerful that it pulled me up into his frequency. And I felt what it was like to be in that. And when I got out of the meeting, or when I got out of the session, that stuck with me for a significant amount of time. And I remember thinking, wow, this is really nice. I would like to feel like this all the time. It must be amazing to be him and feel, like they say, frequency, vibration, whatever. I felt really good, like everything was really good. And then it slowly faded over time, and I wanted to capture that back again. So I realized shortly after that I needed to do some shadow work. And that's a whole other video I could make. Well, I probably will make, that's the plan of the channel, right? To take you through sort of a chronological, and take it down into useful information for you. So there's the 3D versus the 5D. So as you become more spiritual, hopefully you start pulling back towards, now you're going to be hopefully moving towards, you have your awakening, and now you start digging into these spiritual things, start meditating and doing many, many other things to try to re-establish contact with spirit, with God, with the Creator. So you'll start hopefully moving your consciousness. It's not going to technically move, but it's moving back into the center, where you have your 5D, mind, body, spirit, and your consciousness and your connection to the Creator. That's 5 things. Whereas normally when this is disconnected and you're not spiritual anymore, there's only 3 things, 3D. So you don't want to be stuck in 3D, stuck in your ego, where everything you do is out of lack or out of fear. Because, you get traumatized as a kid. We've all, most people I found have had not great childhoods. Some have had, I'm sure, but I was taken advantage of when I was a kid. I had alcoholic parents, the list goes on, and your ego starts trying to protect your consciousness, right? Why wouldn't it? Of course it's going to try to protect it. So that's when all these armors, and you start assembling your ego armor so that you can make it through the world, and your little wonderful child doesn't have to experience those negative things anymore. So you want to move back into the 5D. You want to open that back up. You want to heal all that. And then you want to, like what I'm trying to do is be helpful to other people. I guess my calling seems to be shadow work. So that's what this channel will be mostly focused on. But I feel like that's probably enough for this video. The 3D versus 5D. Get out of your ego and get back into contact with the spirit. That's basically what that means. So when you hear that in these other conversations, you'll have a kind of a base of understanding. So I think this is probably a good time for me to end the video. So I will see you later. You are worthy of all the love in the universe, and I am sending you mine. Thank you.